My impression was they always were going to go for AGI, but they felt like we're nice. And if we control the AGI or we produce the AGI, it's not as threatening to humanity as if Demis does it.
Yeah. And to be clear, I think that entire ontology is broken. I'm happy to compose that if you're interested.
Go for it. Go for it.
Well, where to begin? I think the place plausibly to begin is the concept of AGI. So I think that Craig and Sam and Ilya deserve a lot of credit for branding themselves with what was a Craig ideology kind of idea. The folk I worked with at Google Brain were judgmental of OpenAI for being dreamers, right? So we're believing that the goals that were set out in the 60s for AI were all going to be achieved by them. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, they were totally right to be dreamers. And we live in this world where it was all correct. And the reason that I named the house AGI House is that we got AGI. So what do I mean by that? Because that feels strange and controversial. Well, actually, there is a prior paradigm, which is narrow intelligence. It used to be the case that you would train a different machine learning model. So machine learning, I know, as a term, is no longer popular, but actually convolutional neural networks, even in the face of ImageNet, had to be trained per task. And you would have to collect new data in order to have your model do something new that wasn't already pre-trained into the model. And so for me, the advent of the foundation model is about generality.
Yes.
And the general, to be clear for your audience, in artificial general intelligence, the G is general. So it's about whether you have an intelligence that can more or less do anything as opposed to being confined to its specific task.
Welcome to Manifold. We're here at AGI House, Twin Peaks, San Francisco. Our guest today is Jeremy Nixon. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Steve, an absolute joy to be here.
An honor to have you. I am off camera because you are so cool in your equation covered jacket, and the view of the bay is so awesome in the background that I don't want to take up any space
Too good to know.
on the video. So, Jeremy, super happy to have you on the show. This interview is for Manifold, of course, but we are also shooting a documentary film project. The tentative title is Dreamers and Doomers. And on this side of the bay, at places like AGI House, we want to talk to the biggest dreamers who see a positive future in AI and are working to make that future. And you are the first interview in that series.
I'm honored. And I have, to be clear, lots of love for both the doomer and dreamer perspective. As I told you, I believe that in many ways the doomers are the true dreamers. And it's almost in my disappointment with the technology that I can be interviewed as a dreamer. I have some sense that there is incredible potential. So we are here at the AI Physics Hackathon. You've just walked us through your GPT-5 generated results around the Schrodinger equation. And it's obviously exciting to experience the potential of a full comprehension of our reality through an alien intelligence that we have invented. And we get to be the bridge generation to that new form of understanding itself, right? So it feels like we've invented something that might be as foundational as language, right? Where you're using this extension of yourself, of your tools, to create new forms of understanding that didn't exist before. These, like, the embedding in GPT-5, representation of the knowledge plausibly deeper than its textual representation of the mathematics, this improvement on this question of whether the Schrodinger equations are linear. And so, I guess, why not be excited about the future of physics, where, hopefully we end up with new inventions. We end up creating things that were inconceivable to ourselves. Like, our entire frame for what's possible is a function of our understanding of physics. Like, how recently did we not know about quantum mechanics and eventually quantum computing? Like, what awaits a deeper understanding of the fundamentals of our reality? There's all these questions that we can ask of systems that may go beyond us that I'm excited to bring into existence today. So hopefully at the end of the night, at AGI House, we try to build with the creator. So here, you are the creator of this new way of sort of doing discovery, this feedback loop with your agent, having some proposal and critique as sort of the structure of the agent. Hopefully the people here can come up with new discoveries in physics today, and we can be a part of this historical moment.
Great. So, I am incredibly envious of younger people your age, because you're at the height of your powers and you're experiencing this AI takeoff moment. And I'm just happy that, here, now that I'm an old guy, I at least get to see this before I pass from the scene. But I think you guys are in the best position of any generation ever. Maybe not the average person who maybe could experience some dislocation from AIs taking their jobs, but someone like you who's a brilliant thinker and also an entrepreneur. I just feel so much envy for people like you who are making the most of this moment. Let me tell the audience a little bit about you, and you can just elaborate a little bit. You grew up in Michigan. Your father was a professor of Victorian literature. You went to Harvard and you studied applied math and many other things at Harvard. And last night you told me, hey man, I was smart enough to realize I didn't have to go to academia. I could just go to Google Brain, be paid way beyond what most professors are paid right out of college, and work with some of the greatest researchers on the planet. And that's what you did. So now, how many years ago was that? When did you graduate from college, from Harvard?
Yeah, so I am Harvard class of 2015. And yeah, it's very true. I see the Google Brain PhD as an incredibly lucrative, but simultaneously intellectually deep and rewarding collaboration, and was able to publish with the inventor of the diffusion model. To be clear, at the time, we had no idea what it would mean to have this sort of paper-based non-equilibrium thermodynamics. So, there's a lot of physics influence on Yoshida Dixon. I was able to publish on meta-optimization with the creative thinking machines. So all these folk are now doing phenomenal things. But the idea behind meta-optimization, that a neural network can itself be the optimizer, is actually is an incredibly deep theme. And it was a joy to be at Brain. I didn't end up doing a PhD, but in practice have a publication record of someone who had done a PhD. And yeah, I certainly loved those years of intellectual depth. Like I invented, a number of uncertainty metrics, which made it to, among other things, the teams at Waymo with recalibrators that are required to detect whether or not someone's present or not. There's a sense that you have this potential to not only do research, but have that research enter reality in a really deep way very quickly. And I have just a lot of love for the research lab as a concept. So I'm here next to one of my bookshelves. So we have Richard Rhodes's Making of the Atomic Bomb. It discusses, certainly the Manhattan Project, which is an archetypal mass research lab style experiment. Certainly Project Apollo, the Apollo program. So, a lot of these projects attempt to put all the greatest researchers, the greatest minds into the exact same organization in this very intensive sprint to some glorious research outcome. And why would I be in a backwater PhD program when I could be at the center of the action?
I think you're totally right. I think you had a lot of life insight in choosing what you did in the 10 years since you left college. And now, after some years working at Google, you've kind of gone off on your own. And I almost introduced you at the beginning of the show as the impresario of AI, because you sort of pioneered the group house idea here in the Bay Area, right? You had a group house down in the South Bay. We are currently here in San Francisco on the, with a beautiful view of the entire city. And you filled this house with other entrepreneurial, agentic, super smart people. And when I talk to people in the Bay Area, even people who are older, like say up to 40 years old, they say this is their preferred way of living. They'd rather live in a communal environment, a very nice house, big house, luxurious house actually, but they are constantly meeting new people through the network, through the other people in the house. There's always some exciting thing going on. Right now you're running this hackathon. Just talk about the scene. Like what is life like for a 30-ish person in the Bay Area who is as talented as you?
Yeah, I guess there's a question. Why live alone in a one-bedroom apartment by yourself when you could grab 7 of your most brilliant friends, people who you have a conversation with them, and in the face of them, you come up with dozens of worthy ideas. And combined forces, that is, at the intersection of all of your friends, are just a tremendous number of brilliant people. And so you can co-create at all sorts of events. So one of my roommates introduced me to you. She said, I was just talking to Steve Sue. I got so excited because I love, certainly your work on genomic intelligence and certainly the stuff at Manifold and your blogs. So I was like, oh, wow, that'd be incredible. Just a very impromptu kind of introduction that creates, more rich social life. And I think in a lot of cases, people live in a way that's within their means, and they degrade their lifestyle in order to do it. But the nice thing about co-living is you can rent a huge mansion, but actually pay a totally reasonable amount because you and your friends, split the cost of the space. And in the mansion, you can bring in 300 friends for a massive party, or 200 friends for a big hackathon. Or we have a week of reading event. So we have a reading society, and people, explore everything from philosophy to sort of majoring textbooks in a single sitting. And that kind of thing is hard to do if you don't kind of own the space. So as soon as you have the space, you can be creative and do anything. And so there's something about, I guess this style of creating societies and communities that I love. But I also think at the core of it is a deeper intention. So Silicon Valley has a very special culture. We have this sort of hero worship of the founder archetype. And we have a novel currency. We have sort of cryptocurrency. We have a novel sort of body of religious movements. The apocalypse cults, the Bay Area are infamous for having spawned OpenAI and Anthropic, but simultaneously, there's techno-utopianism and the sense that there's infinite potential. So I guess regardless of where you stand on these kind of intense beliefs about the future, you are part of a memeplex type claim that's interactive and that has a lot of very unusual beliefs relative to the general population. Actually, the EAs and the EACs, they have much more in common than, sort of a standard person working a standard job.
Let's break it down so my listener, I've got plenty of normie listeners who are just, professor of X at some perfectly respectable Big Ten university, and they have no idea what EAC is or EA or how OpenAI and Anthropic, as you just said, actually originated in these kind of apocalyptic cult beliefs. So let's break it down a little bit. So let's tell us the story of how the very existence of OpenAI and Anthropic, which are changing, two companies which are changing the world, have already in their brief existence changed the way people live and interact with technology. How did they originate from a Bay Area apocalyptic death cult?
So I mean, partially I feel like I'm in the right position to answer this because I recently started a new company called Infinity, which is all about automating research and the way that AI systems today can do code generation and automatically optimize that code to do discovery as a way to evaluate a discovery. And so it's in the same tradition as a lot of these big research labs, which start with this assumption that you'll have recursively self-improving AI systems. So there's a very long history, but basically everything from the Singularity Institute to its renaming to MIRI to Elon's fear of Demis.
Okay, let me break it.
There's a lot of detail.
Yeah,
So
you know all this cold, and I want to help break it down for the audience.
Let me keep it simple.
Yeah.
So why does OpenAI exist?
Yeah.
Well, there's a version of the story which is Elon, when he became aware of Demis' habits, would create a DeepMind. DeepMind had produced this phenomenal Atari system based on deep reinforcement learning. And so to be clear, on dates here, it's 2011 through 2015. And actually, Peter Thiel, interestingly, met Demis at Singularity Summit back in 2010. So why was DeepMind funded? Well, actually, the Bay Area has the singularity concept, and Michael Vassar was running this conference. Demis gave a talk on computational neuroscience. Peter invested in DeepMind. At the time, Demis was kind of working with Tommaso Poggio and was in The Legacy of Mara and got on the Gatsby. So he had his own history. But Elon met Demis Hassabis, this founder of DeepMind, and was horrified that they were going to, in the strong language of the initial DeepMind proposal, solve intelligence and use it to solve everything else. And there was this sort of thread in the vibe of Demis Habbis. So this mind, this person who's smarter than anyone. He's won the Mind Sports Olympiad 5 times, but he's also created these very edgy video games that have religious themes. You'll play the position of God in his games. So Elon believed that Demis was a danger to the future of humanity. And to be clear, Elon loves this sort of savior complex psychology. And I'd say a lot of that category of God complex characterizes the apocalypse. Generally speaking, it's common. I don't want to pretend that climate change isn't, in this category of belief. It is. Everyone's interested in saving the world. And how do you be a good person? Well, you play a part in the story of saving the world.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have it on very good authority that I don't know that Elon still believes this now or exactly how much he believes it at this moment. But at the time, he was very fascinated by the idea that we live in a simulation. There are only a few player characters. Everybody else, like me, I'm sure you're a player character, but people like me are just NPCs. But definitely, Elon thinks of himself as a player character. And Demis, also a player character. And he was afraid that the point of the game was to get to AGI first. And he was afraid that the reason he had to help create OpenAI, I started jumping a little ahead of the story. The reason that he had to help create OpenAI was because otherwise Demis and Google were going to win the race to AI. And this is after Google acquired DeepMind, which was Demis's company.
Yeah, exactly. Bending to Larry Page. So I have a lot to say about that acquisition. But yes, I think Elon's obsession with this simulation concept, it makes sense if you've lived the life of Elon. Like, think for a moment.
Yeah. Like, you're the richest man in the world.
If you had created SpaceX
right.
walked on water, so to speak. And this is 2014, so he wasn't an ambiguous character in the same way that he is now. And so, it would make sense to model the world that way. So there's something to be said, I think, for the Samuel Burritt, like live players. There are only a few true agents concept, but I do see you as a live player.
Okay, thank you.
I think you created a company in this sort of genomic intelligence line that would not otherwise have existed. I think it's counterfactual, and in general, I think there's a lot to be said for your work. That's Elon and Sam Altman and Ilya Sutskever collaborated to create OpenAI in the face of the threat from DeepMind. And if you look at their internal comms, it validates the story. They're now, in much legal sort of war with one another, so we can see these comms around how we can't allow Demis to control AGI and superintelligence. And so they create this new entity. It was, for me, a shock at the time because I thought that their marketing made no sense. They called it OpenAI. They planned to open source everything, but they simultaneously claimed that it would be this recursively self-improving artificial intelligence that was capable of, achieving more or less anything. And so trying to reconcile that as a safety-minded person is really hard. OpenAI made no sense at the opening. Now they modified their ideas quite quickly, which it seems actually were kind of a debate between Elon and Sam on what it should be. But at the opening, it made no sense from a safety perspective. But the justification for it was, Demis's approach is going to end humanity. And to be clear, this was like in the wake of Asilomar. There were these sort of series of conferences that Elon attended, where folk like Max Tegmark had raised a bunch of these fears about the specter of apocalyptic superintelligence and wanted to address those problems with new organizations. And it all is very ironic in the end. So both in OpenAI at first and then Anthropic turn to acceleration as their primary practical ethos, while ostensibly having these founding roots in like the idea that what they're doing is an apocalyptic process.
My impression was they always were going to go for AGI, but they felt like we're nice, and if we control the AGI or we produce the AGI, it's not as threatening to humanity as if Demis does it.
And to be clear, I think that entire ontology is broken. I'm happy to decompose that if you're interested.
Go for it.
Well, where to begin? I think the place plausibly to begin is the concept of AGI. So I think that Craig and Sam and Ilya deserve a lot of credit for branding themselves with what was a crank ideology kind of idea. And the folk I worked with at Google Brain were judgmental of OpenAI for being dreamers, right? So we're believing that the goals that were set out in the 60s for AI were all going to be achieved by them. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, they're they were totally right to be dreamers. And we live in this world where it was all correct. And the reason that I named the house AGI House is that we got AGI. So what do I mean by that? Because that feels strange and controversial. Well, actually, there is a prior paradigm, which is narrow intelligence. It used to be the case that you would train a different model, machine learning model. So machine learning, I know as a term, is no longer popular, but actually convolutional neural networks, even in the face of ImageNet, had to be trained per task. And you would have to collect new data in order to have your model do something new that wasn't already pre-trained into the model. And so for me, the advent of the foundation model is about generality.
Yes.
And the general, to be clear for your audience, in artificial general intelligence, the G is general. So it's about whether you have an intelligence that can more or less do anything as opposed to being confined to its specific task.
Yeah. I think your definition of AGI is perfectly reasonable, general versus narrow.
Right.
And we have generalized. So by your definition, we have achieved AGI through these foundation models.
Yeah, the models are general. That's why we call them foundation models. So the foundation model term was created to make a distinction between that category of model and the category of models that came before it. And so at a minimum, I think it's easy to claim that there was a huge jump in generality when we got to the foundation model, to this sort of, basically prefixed task. You run an LLM on it, you tremendous amounts of training data, it sees more or less all text on the internet. It is capable of solving arbitrary problems that you give it in language processing. This paradigm, in my opinion at the time, was the AGI paradigm. And so I was surprised the foundation model concept gave these people an out to say we don't have AGI. And certainly human level AI and superintelligence, which, jagged superintelligence is the correction, but obviously you just want the pure thing, not the correction to a bad term. All these ideas have been given as examples of how we could conceptualize things. I have my issue with them too, but I think that the AGI concept for me was fulfilled by Claude.
I think that's totally fair for a reasonable definition of AGI. I think you're totally correct.
Yeah.
Right. I think what these guys are worried about across the bay over in Berkeley is recursively self-improving AI that gets out of control and maybe surpasses human intelligence by vast amounts, has a sense of agency itself and wants to do things in the universe which aren't necessarily aligned with what we want. So I think that's what they would call the threat. And some people differ on how many years away that threat is. Maybe it's never, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 1 year.
Yeah, I do think that's a succinct representation of their present representation of things. But yeah, I spent a lot of time in and around those ideas. I was reading Less Wrong in 2011. I read Eliezer's sequences. I certainly read Neat's Coming of Age, The Dark Arts of Rationality. And I do think that in many ways that community's fallen victim to a lot of sort of the cognitive biases that they are typically obsessed with. And
just to clarify that for the listener. So, so the culture within the so-called rationalist community, which is centered around some core texts like Eliezer Yudkowsky's, this is the Harry Potter sequences, right? Where it's set
H.P. Moore, Harry Potter and the Methods of
Rationality. So it's set in a kind of Harry Potter fan fiction universe, but the protagonist is learning about how to use Bayes' rule and reason rationally and overcome biases.
Exactly.
Which I think is all, for me, super admirable.
So the characters are incredible.
Yeah.
It's just so beautiful to watch Harry use enhanced intelligence to make logic out of magic.
And I would say even some top-level scientists are not really that rational. They maybe can apply scientific method in their narrow area, but when they reason about politics or something like that...
I see this as a political, a thing, actually. It's strangely activating the same subset of people as tribal identities that typically would be associated with a political position. So when Yoshua Bengio or Jeff Hinton talks to you about the future of AI, it's typically from a political perspective, as social. It's we need to make sure that the people, it's communal. The people are given what they're due. It's anti-corporate in a lot of cases. There's this sort of political question around whether companies should or shouldn't control things. That is really important to folk. And I would say, even the government has this China-centric race conception of AGI. It's which geopolitical entity will have control or predominance. And there are contexts where that matters, like when you're at war,
right,
who dies or not is a function of that kind of ideological position. But it's unclear to me that any of these ideological positions, which are tribal in nature, are grounded in the facts of the situation. So I kind of take umbrage with the underlying thought process that starts with, having an identity as someone who's trying to save the world, or as someone who, I think the right word is probably believes in a utilitarian ethos around effective altruism. And the fear of identity, no one will explicitly identify as an EA to you. It's always like adjacency or something like it. Is a little bit savvy to how dangerous it can be to think with identity. But practically speaking, the tribes that have built up around these things are like deeply inclusive or exclusive as a function of your beliefs. And so I think there's a lot to be said for how those dynamics play out in Berkeley.
Yes. So the rationalist movement is a group of people. It's remarkable because it's self-organized, and the main leaders of this community, they don't have necessarily, fancy college degrees or resumes. They wrote mainly on the internet. Lots of people, brilliant people like yourself, read these things when they were growing up, right? So let the website Less Wrong, the sequences, they influenced a whole, in a way, generation of smart kids all around the world. I've been to meetings at Lighthaven where some kid is flying in from Portugal or Japan and saying, I read all this stuff and I'm here to finally meet the people, and they're in ecstasy at having reached the Holy Land. It's incredible. As a sociological phenomenon, it's incredible. And I actually think in certain ways these guys can use, like if you read some discussion, very long discussion on Less Wrong, they are sometimes reasoning more rationally than college professors about a particular topic. So I admire the discourse sometimes that I see on the site Less Wrong. Now, I think you're pointing out a very crucial thing, which is that when they come to talk about existential risk from AI, they are falling prey to the same cognitive biases that they claim to have strengthened themselves to resist, right? The whole ethos of the movement is to overcome bias and be rational and reason clearly. But I think your critique is that when they think about existential risk, they're getting it wrong, and it's ironic. I think you said it's ironic because they're falling prey to the very things that they had set out to not fall prey to. Is that fair?
Well, yeah. I mean, to be clear, they live out a heroic ideology. And so Nate, there's this blog post in Less Rock Style called On Saving the World.
Yeah.
And it's about when he decided to become the savior of the world. And just to think about how fun it is to live life that way.
Yeah.
Be in the meaning level of somebody whose actions determine whether or not everything exists.
Yeah. Wouldn't it suck if all you were doing is like trying to get that promotion and meet that nice girlfriend? Instead, you could be saving the whole world.
Meaningful. Yeah, exactly. And to be clear, that if it's true, there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually the most admirable thing. And I think that the heroic instinct, and in many ways, it's kind of a masculine instinct. Like I would like to sacrifice myself in the ultimate way for the collective. Yeah, exactly. Is in many ways a cornerstone of human psychology.
Now, is your critique though that they're looking for an apocalyptic existential threat because they want to be that hero, and therefore they've identified AI as that threat, even if it isn't justifiable to do so? Is that your critique?
Yes.
Okay.
And to be clear, they say this themselves. They say, I was looking for the maximally effective action that I could take. And what could be more effective than averting an apocalypse? And they write books like The Precipice. So Toby Ord, philosopher. And there's an entire generation of philosophers behind this. Not just McCaskill, but Singer, like utilitarian philosophy, leads you to this very interesting long-termist conclusion. That if I value long-term utility, all that matters is the probability that everybody dies. And small changes to that probability are worth far more than any amount of good that I could do in the present.
Yes.
And there's a really beautiful elegance to that kind of ethics. And it's sacrificial not only of yourself, but of your entire generation, potentially. Because what value is this generation of living people in comparison to the trillions of sentient entities that will exist in the future as a function of our attempts to curtail existential risk.
Yes. And, you've got now this very intense kind of discussion of these utilitarian calculations, making very strong assumptions about how many people are going to live in the future and what the probability that a certain technology is going to wipe out humanity, et cetera.
Yeah. It's all Pascal's mugging.
Yeah. And,
which makes requires an explanation.
Yeah. And it strikes, as a very fun game for smart people to play. But I think you're beyond that, right? So you're actually engaged in the practical creation of the future, using these technologies, right?
Absolutely.
And so in our documentary, we're profiling what we call the dreamers, as just opposed to the doomers.
Right.
And for you, the day-to-day part of life is encountering beautiful, deep ideas and trying to use them to make a difference in the world. Is that fair?
I mean, that is definitely true of me and everyone I interact with.
Yeah.
So the original sort of founding thesis of Genesis was self-awareness in action. And everyone would give a speech about what was worth creating and why. So yeah, we are like a kind of creation-centric ideology. We think creating new things, bringing things in the world, having a new idea and making that new idea real is a lifestyle that you should embrace. And so almost everyone is researching and coming up with discoveries, is building companies. So my roommates are folk like Anton Asika, who made Buzzable, which is actually an act of meta creation. So every user if you don't know what Level is, it's this web site generator. So you describe in just a few English words what you want the website to be, and it creates the entire web app for you. Log in, etc. It's like comprehensive and it's beautiful. And so he's blown up and raised $1 billion valuations.
Yeah, and Lovable is the fastest growing it's the fastest growing software product ever in history in terms of
it was the fastest growing ever. I believe 5 months ago, some new AI company was the fastest ever. But basically, he went from 10 to 100 mil in revenue in 6 to 7 months. Last year. Yeah.
Incredible.
And so Anton's a great example. Andre is a great example. So he made the Tesla autopilot system. Well, he led the team that made it and hired that team, and Elon trusted him to do that. And he and I co-created the AGI House in Hillsborough. And his ethos is very creation-centric as well. So people read his educational works on his blog, which teach people how to create high-quality machine learning models. And so, I guess the core thesis of Neogenesis, sort of the precursor to AGI House, was unleashing heroic creation. So as opposed to the hero living inside of the savior complex, it's a distinct God complex. It's the creator complex.
Yes.
And the term Neogenesis actually stood in part for the new creation of the universe. The idea being with sufficient scientific progress, whether it be via Wolfram-style, cellular automata, or I'm sure you've been programming the universe, sort of work in quantum computing, complex simulation. The idea is basically you can invent technologies that are as creative as to allow you to make entire universes. And I'm sure high fidelity video game simulations will eventually give way to real physics simulators that do these kinds of complex computations. So we really believe in creation, and it's a different category of God complex. I think it's more optimistic, dreamer-like, as you say. I think the people are happier, less neurotic.
Yeah, well, some of the selection could be some of the selection could be if you're prone to neuroticism, then you're over there.
Yeah, psychological.
Yeah, and on the other hand, if you're intrinsically an optimist and have a sort of positive disposition, then you're over here. Yeah, right. Yeah. So
I think that's plausible, and people make the decision on aesthetic grounds.
Yeah.
These people have aesthetics of high creation. These people are trying to save the planet. I think that's the positive version of that. In practice, I don't know, folk like Jessica Taylor to paralyze with fear that any action you take could bring about the apocalypse, and on that basis, you don't want to leave your bed.
Now, people over here on this side have been accused of wanting to create the machine god. And how much of that is just a kind of fanciful caricature of what's going on? How much of it is really a deep motivating factor for people who work on foundation models and things like this?
Oh, I mean, I think the doomers really want to create the machine god. I don't know.
To make their lives meaningful, or make their resistance meaningful.
So, I guess. I think the religious element is really important. So maybe we should start at the beginning. Eliezer as a writer, began as a deconversion artist. So I would say a huge fraction of his writings in 2008 and 2009 were critiques of Christianity. And the roots of the rationality movement are actually New Atheism. So there's a deconversion experience that happened at scale to people who were on the internet and were part of the rationality community. So that in many ways makes him this pseudo-religious leader. He has deconverted you from your religion. And who are you going to look to answer deeper questions about meaning and purpose and who to be in the world? The rationalists and the EAs give you an answer. The answer is that you can reduce the probability of the apocalypse by addressing existential risk through AI safety research. And that ideology is incredibly internally coherent and seductive. So I think that when you talk about creating, the machine god, so to speak, a lot of the language patterns there originate in the, frankly, like religious and anti-religious patterns of the rationality movement, where cult leaders from every part of the world gather in Berkeley to, I mean, if you ask any of them, they'll often tell you this explicitly. Like they're interested in the formation of a new religious movement. And in a lot of cases have been deconverted by people who are in that very community from Christianity, typically, but also from Islam and from other religious movements.
In particular, though, the AI existential risk community, is their religion basically the Butlerian jihad from Dune, that thou shalt not create a machine in the shape of a human mind, or is there more to their religion than that?
I think it's two-sided. So I mean, Eliezer was the original accelerationist. So I don't know if you've read his work from '98.
I haven't. No, tell me, what was he writing about in 2000?
So he was a transhumanist. So you remember, Plus and the email lists where Bostrom and Eliezer would trade ideas on how to, achieve every conceivable technological breakthrough.
Yes.
And he had this sort of turning against AI in the face of some theoretical ideas that recursive self-improvement would create an apocalypse, but actually was totally obsessed with every transhumanist ideal, biotranshumanism.
Yes.
So the ideal of immortality. I think Bostrom kind of came back around to it in many ways. He's now writing about deep utopia. He expects on some subconscious level that, AI is not the risk we thought it was, and is much more likely to create a utopia than create an apocalypse. And I think that's accurate. Now, Eliezer, he had this sort of turning, but the original name of MIRI was the Singularity Institute.
Yes, they were trying to achieve it, right?
To achieve the singularity, yes.
Right,
so
right.
Who was accusing who? Of trying to build the machine god. I know he's the original pursuer of the machine god. And so, of course, has that concept.
Great. That's fantastic. It's a fantastic elaboration of how this whole thing evolved over the last 20 plus years. Yeah. I've never actually heard anyone give that. Maybe in some communities this is well understood, but I'd never heard anybody give that full story. So thank you very much.
Yeah. I am surprised that this isn't like everybody's representation of the situation.
Yeah.
Because Sam Altman hilariously, I don't remember what year it was, maybe in 21 and 22, called Eliezer out for being more counterfactually relevant to the creation of
I think it was more recently than that, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you remember this quote.
Yeah, I do remember this quote.
Yeah, maybe you tell me.
It may have happened on X, actually.
It was on X.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And no, it's totally true that he's far more responsible for the reality of superintelligence than Sam or Dario or these sort of like characters who are just playing the role of Eliezer's story. Right.
Let me descend to something a little more mundane. Because of the huge flow of resources into the development of AI research, AI applications, 2% of our GDP right now is being spent on data center investments, buying chips, scaling AI training and inference. For someone like you who worked at Google Brain, obviously a polymath and understands everything that's going on, knows everyone in Silicon Valley and in San Francisco, this must be an amazing moment for you. So you have investors coming to you saying, hey, Jeremy, if you can just introduce me to some, I need to get exposure to AI native companies started by young people, and you're the guy who can do it for me, right? Do you have people just beating down your door trying to get some of your time, some of your expertise?
Yeah, so it is the case that 16 of so I've had 70 roommates at my house.
70.
70, yeah.
Yeah.
16 of those roommates have started unicorns or sent $1 million.
Can I move in tomorrow? Because those are pretty good odds, right?
Yeah. So, so my roommate's just now raising a $500 million valuation for his company that he started, I want to say, 13 months ago. And I guess I told you about Anton, but certainly my other roommate, I shouldn't disclose how much, but he and Sam Altman started this new Bell Labs.
Right.
It's doing incredible sort of cultural work in allowing scientists, physicists actually in a lot of cases, to do their sort of wildest dreams style of research.
Right.
And so, people at the house are up to all sorts of incredible things, and people love investing in it.
So tell me, where will Jeremy Nixon be in 5 years?
I mean, I am a dreamer, as you say. So my ideal scenario would be that my company, Infinity, had become the process by which the vast majority of scientific and technological progress had been made. To be clear, we are obsessed with creating research agents. The core idea is that most of the kind of epistemological structures that support science, whether it be in the context of medicine, the t-test, in the context of computer science and ML, the benchmark, a lot of these epistemological methods can both be improved on by automated systems, but can be used as an automated feedback loop. So we're all familiar with the discoveries in mathematics that have been made with AI systems. There you have a really simple epistemology. The proof is correct or incorrect. Mm-hmm. But in all these contexts where you have a more ambiguous epistemology, where it's uncertain, you need to create metrics. And as soon as you have a measure, your AI system can basically be trained against the measure. And so the process of automatically optimizing against the metric is how Infinity optimizes inference. So present inference is how all AI is executed. So it's the forward pass of a large language model or diffusion model that produces a text roll result or an image, and we optimize that using inference. So my intention with Infinity is to build a general research agent that doesn't just solve this problem, but can really solve problems across the engineering disciplines, mechanical, electrical engineering, where you have simulations that allow you to measure the capabilities of physical objects. And as soon as you get a measure of whether your physical object achieves some goal, maybe it's a plane and it has some aerodynamics and you're optimizing its speed, you can have a coding agent write the relevant CAD code that configures the simulation that optimizes sort of the real world. Similar story in bio. So if you have a tumor, that cancer tumor can be sequenced, and an antibody that has a binding affinity to the tumor has a metric that can be optimized. And so you have some constraints around toxicity, but basically these metric optimization problems allow you to create personalized cancer treatments where you create antibodies per person as a function of an AI discovery process that reliably finds, antibodies that bind really well to the tumor and not to any other part of the body, creating toxicity.
Will your agents be based on someone else's foundation model and you're fine-tuning the agent or building scaffolding around it, or will you someday be training your own foundation models?
So we have a agent that discovers new foundation model training processes. So one of its discoveries, which we are about to publish, is around stacking. It has discovered a new way to ensemble models together so that when they make predictions, those predictions are trained on by yet another model that refines the decision of which model to pay attention to. And that basically allows the ensemble to more effectively represent the diversity of perspectives on a problem. And in many ways, actually, I can see like multi-prompting. So you have this setup, this sort of critique model where there's a proposal and a critique.
Yeah.
And internalizing these patterns in ensembles is actually a really scalable technique. And so what's interesting about the discovery is it didn't come out of sort of my intuition. An AI system that has an ontology of the space of possible proposals that it could make discovered this research proposal, coded it up, evaluated it, and showed that it was outperforming against tens of thousands of other research ideas. And so the insane scale of these AI scientists is part of what allows them to, in my mind, in future, be a huge fraction of research progress. So a previous launch of mine, so I've had a bunch of product launches. One of them is a research paper generator. So we created what we call Archive Gen, which was an archive, but every paper was created by a data analysis agent. So we'd get a real data set, it would use code generation to perform data analysis and go until it discovered something of merit. And then it would publish the result. And it would publish it with code, so it's kind of replicable. And it's this sort of system for creating a version of archive, which is totally generated by AI minds. And so there's the sense that there will be two archives. There's the human minds working, you know, with their meat, and there's the data center of AI scientists, which are generating a much larger number of papers and maybe more minor insights. But the core thing with this AI scientist paradigm is everything is totally replicable. There's no nonsense around sort of the political scheming that goes into research in academia. It's a lot of genuine intent.
The vision for Infinity, your company Infinity that you're describing, where I had to put on my Ellie Aitzer hat, I would say is getting dangerously close to things which can improve AI and improve themselves, right? So
that's one frame, but another frame is like, you like talked about your own mortality at the beginning of this talk. It seems to me that we are in far more danger of allowing this generation of people to go without antibodies that cure their cancers, because we are neurotically obsessed with a paradigm that actually I didn't go into detail about this, but basically good old-fashioned AI is the context where Eliezer developed a bunch of these ideas. And his original thesis was the fragility of AI. It'd be like a genie. Like the fragility of its interpretation of your request would mean that if you asked it to pick a strawberry off a plate, it would destroy the world, because it wouldn't understand that, it didn't have to fulfill your request to the umpteenth probability. And it would verify to like some extreme degree that it had done that. Another example you would give would be the paperclip factory. So to be clear, like you can run a paperclip factory using Claude, and it's not gonna destroy the universe. Mm-hmm. But the idea at the time was you'd ask an AI to make paperclips for you, and in its overzealousness, it would turn the entire universe into paperclips. And Eliezer took these ideas very seriously. I know it sounds a little bit ridiculous or absurd.
No, I think
describe it. Eliezer took these ideas very seriously.
I think plenty of people on that side of things still take these ideas seriously.
Yeah. And so to be clear, the grounding intuition for these ideas is good old-fashioned AI. So machine learning researcher would have intuitively thought that kind of problem would occur. It's about really, so the frame of Othram is called edge instantiation and optimization. It's about the way optimal solutions are typically at the edge of solution spaces. And they just assume the kind of fragility that the old versions of AI had, where you do search and you find extremal solutions, and the kind of problems that generally computers have. So you write code that's off by a single character, and it doesn't compile, it fails entirely. Like these kinds of problems would afflict general intelligence. But they didn't anticipate that machine learning would be the form factor of general intelligence. And so back in 2007, I talked to Eliezer about gradient descent, and it was clear to me that he had no idea how gradient-based optimization actually works, that he had not spent time in deep learning research, despite it, in my opinion, having been 6 years since the ImageNet moment, and 3 years since DeepMind had produced their deep reinforcement learning algorithm. And in my mind, his intuitions needed to be recalibrated for a new machine learning paradigm. And they tried and failed to do it. So at Myriad in 2017 had this project with Jessica Taylor and Andrew Klitsch and a few others who tried to sort of do machine learning research around agent foundations. But Eliezer's reaction to the failure of the sort of game theoretic agent foundations research agenda that they had at Myriad was to declare that since he's an ego issue. So since he is the smartest person and was unable to solve safety,
no one else is going to get
game theory. So they had a number of novel decision theories, and so they had what they call common decision theory. And they had a number of decision theories that failed to address the problems in decision theory they believed would be at the root of the apocalypse. And I tried to convince them that these things are irrelevant to machine learning and irrelevant to deep learning. And they instead concluded that, well, since it's not possible for us to solve AI safety, there will not be any group that could ever solve AI safety. And they went down this recursive kind of dark hole, in my opinion, of like everything is doomed. He published this work in like, I don't remember.
I remember, yes, I remember this.
Like
yes.
Very dark stuff.
Yes.
And I think kind of out of touch with a lot of people who are in machine learning who are just like, yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to justify. I actually, I think it's a little tragic. And if he was sort of more, like, I guess, education-wise, agentic, and had like gotten up to speed on like machine learning and RL and re-architected the ontology of AIX risk around machine learning, would have like come to cleaner conclusions.
Would you say it's fair to say that the subsequent generations, so the kids that are just finishing the MATS program, various AI safety programs of education at Lighthaven, know more about how current foundation models function, more about gradient descent, and they tend to have a more kind of moderate but still emphasizing AI safety and risk perspective than the OG, the original guys like Elliotzer. I find it hard to get from them a sharp statement saying it's all doom and gloom. They're a little more measured than that. They're just saying, hey, we're on the lookout for safety risks that are going to emerge from this technology. And they won't be as categorical, I think, as Elliotzer, but they just want us to focus more on safety. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah. I mean, I think it is purely a perceptual bias now, which is actually a pretty weak version of the brew.
Right.
You can look at any technology with like maximally shaded eyes and see the ways in which it's dangerous. And that is, in my opinion, a much more anodyne than Eliezzer's apocalyptic perspective.
Right.
And yeah, I think it is wholesome.
Better for their employment too.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't really buy that people are that financially motivated in that community.
They're not, but
I really think they're kind of genuine, and like the indoctrination works and is real, and so people genuinely believe.
No, I agree.
It's not like a
potential thing. But the side effect is that they're tolerable colleagues at the big labs, because instead of saying
it's not even that they're tolerable. The founders of those labs are all believers.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. But young people can easily get jobs in AI safety, but they couldn't if they were really violently against everything. If they were stop AI, you're killing us all.
Yeah.
If that was their attitude, they could not get jobs at these labs. Whereas if they're just sort of like,
I don't know.
I'm helping you with
I know, maybe.
I'm helping you with interpretability.
So there's a point at which Sam turned against this stuff, and so to be fair, I don't think it was unjustified.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folk in Anthropic are really genuine believers that.
I agree. I'm not saying they're
and very much accept this kind of person. And like look for this person actually.
Oh, I see. So even the apocalyptic, they're looking for the person with the kind of apocalyptic interpretation.
Yeah, I think with the like serious folk at Anthropic around like existential risk, are open-minded about apocalypse risk and are interested in working with people who are interested in apocalypse risk. So yeah, I think that's
okay.
It's still very much about. I do think they get a lot of flack from the rationality community for not being that way enough, and like people from OpenPhil leave and like full critique the turn. It feels like a betrayal every time. And actually, there's this entire dynamic in the rationality community of this sort of purity contest of like who's more purely like opposed to AI progress and like more purely afraid of AI, more calling for stop, calling for pause, calling for the data centers to be bombed, calling for like the end of progress. Yeah, I just think a lot of those factions are like held in some substantial regard in the parts of the parts of the Anthropic world that are kind of more apocalyptic. So it's not obvious that it's like a financial hit, but I think I just want to reiterate, it's not financial for these people.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that. Yeah. I just meant that if you were too hardcore, your movement would be possibly limited to be completely outside of the labs, as opposed to having some presence inside the labs by being a little bit more reasonable.
Right.
About,
Yeah. To be clear, I guess. Yeah. I also am pretty sort of frustrated by the lack of like action orientation that existed in the previous generation of sort of like Berkeley rationalist group house worlds. So they write blog posts, but they typically don't start companies. in my opinion, when I was growing up, when I was at Harvard, I saw the 2014 style Tesla SpaceX sort of version of world changing, where if you want to pull off Apollo scale projects, the new model is you start a company like Google or like SpaceX, which has some engine of growth, and it transforms our capacity to go to a new planet or to like do something incredible. And so I really wanted to live in a more kind of agentic, productive world than was on offer in Berkeley with the rationalists back in 2016, 2017. So a lot of like the ethos of AGI House and Neogenesis and Genesis is actually group house culture, but with productive action as the output of intellectual work, where it's about self-awareness, yes, but actually in action. So you need to be in the arena. And I don't have too many roommates who are not in the arena.
Yeah.
You know what I mean by the arena?
Yeah, the arena. Teddy Roosevelt had a famous quote saying that, like, look, you can be a critic sniping off to the side, but if you're the one who gets in the arena and you have blood and sweat on your face, you're the one who really makes it happen. And you're the one who gets it. And I totally agree with that.
Yeah. I guess there's a appreciation for real world action that we have, and the vibe in the Doomer community often is, let's write another blog post about our neurotic.
I think what's unique about you and the world you're creating here is both the commitment to deep intellectualism, which isn't necessarily there in a lot of venture funds or SaaS B2B business.
A la contraire.
Right. So you guys are both action oriented, but also have deep intellectual commitments, which I think is very unique in the world, actually.
Yeah, it's surprising to me that that's the case, and perhaps the 5-year vision includes this culture being spread. So, one interest of mine is an AGI House Global, where whether you're in New York or Cambridge, Mass, Harvard, MIT, or London, whether you're in India or Germany, wherever you are, there's a subculture where people have the Silicon Valley ethos, which believes in gold rush culture. So I see a lot of our sort of culture is basically being obsessed with the idea that that heroic individual can go from rags to riches, can go from zero to hero, and that you listening to this right now, if you seize upon your creative intuitions and believe in yourself to an unearthly degree, and thrust into reality something which otherwise would not exist, you can get the kind of momentum and the feedback loops behind you and the people in a hyperstition that allows you to create something incredible. So many people in Silicon Valley have seen their roommate go from unable to pay rent to
eating ramen, every meal,
ramen, to just wealthy beyond belief, and they have seen them go from nobody knowing who they are to believing them the most impactful person they've ever met, right? And so there's a belief in life changing, and that is the way that life should be. What are you doing? Taking the risk of living a normal life when you could be every single year, risking it all on your next great creative idea. And if you are ever right, the world is forever changed. That ethos ideally be a worldwide ethos. I think that culture is importantly distinct from the West, so to speak, the West, quote unquote. And so I think Europe often doesn't have this kind of ethos. It's something specific to.
But they do have it in
Valley.
Beijing and Shenzhen now.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. And they have an optimism and a kind of technical depth that is rare in the West. I do think that is encouraging. I mean, maybe controversial, but my take on China is it gives me a lot of hope that if and when we culturally drop the ball. So I actually don't know if you read. So Richard Noah and I wrote this book-length text on the stagnation hypothesis. So Peter Thiel has this idea around the stagnation hypothesis. It's called Thiel on progress and stagnation, where in the world of atoms, we have declined. So, there are planes that are faster than the Blackbird, which we created in the 70s. We haven't gone to the moon since the 60s. But clearly in the world of physical things, we are a degraded civilization. And so part of my hope is that, China, in the face of the decline of the West,
will pick up the torch.
Can continue to make progress and at minimum be a foil such that we have to get our things together.
I think it's definitely happening.
And so you go to Shenzhen, and they order food, and the delivery drone shows up in 5 minutes with the food.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, I thought I lived in a first world country. But actually, you live in a backwater that is incapable of manufacturing anything of substance, where every great American entrepreneur flies to Shenzhen, Apple, Foxconn, wherever you are in, manufacturing, you end up, using Asian countries in order to get anything done. And there's some hope, robotics may make it, functional to build things in the United States again. But
those robots are going to end up being built in China, at least in the short run.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you don't build them in China, you're going to be outcompeted by the company that does.
Yeah.
And so I think one thing that the EAs miss about EAC is it's not just a reaction to EA. In a lot of cases, it's not even a reaction to EA. It's a reaction to the stagnation of American technological and manufacturing progress, and to the forces, the ideological forces that led to that degradation. In 2004, we were all told, runaway recursive climate change is going to end humanity. And so on that basis, there's a Luddite culture, and I call them neo-Luddites typically, where you an apparatus for shutting down technological progress in the face of environmental apocalyptic fear. And you can 100% repurpose that apparatus to shut down AI progress with apocalyptic AI fear. And it's very easy for you to imagine, the next 20 years being dominated by a collective sociology of AI doom in the same way that we've been sort of colonized by the psychology of climate doom for the last 20 years. And it's really important. It's incredibly important. So Elon's sort of Tesla pitch, which was fundamentally ideological, was we are leading this sort of transition to sustainable energy, which makes him a good person. Mm-hmm. So in order to be a good person in that world, you need to sort of be solving the apocalyptic problem that everyone knows exists. And even today, if you ask a college kid, how do you be a good person? It's you go fight climate change. And it doesn't really matter. Well, maybe actually it does matter that apocalypse isn't coming, because if it was a real thing, then somehow it wouldn't be ideologically satisfying, and you wouldn't be able to sort of show that you were worthy for going after it. You'd just be solving a practical problem, and all the practical people would be solving it in a practical way. So it wouldn't have as much of an ideological element to it. It would feel, much more like making energy cheaper or something, which is a real practical problem. And it's boring if you do that. You don't get any good person points.
You don't get the credit.
Yeah, you don't get moral credit for that. So I think a lot of the moral credit kind of comes out of it having the very ambiguous status of we don't know if this is real. There are some true believers. There are a lot of skeptics. And so anyone who believes is now important and special and is the difference maker. Right. If everyone agrees, then you just get good policy immediately.
No, you're not special.
There's no space for specialists.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, I want to thank you for taking this time to chat with us. It's been fascinating, and I look forward to watching your trajectory over the next 5 or 10 years. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a joy.
More of the reasons why you're less worried about existential risk, and what you think the doomers or the more rationality people might be getting right, or what versus what they're getting wrong, and then why you would disagree, I guess.
I mean, I definitely wouldn't frame it quite in those terms.
Okay,
Sort of a social disagreement. So I don't know if you have full context, but I worked on uncertainty estimation for out-of-distribution control, primarily as a way to address sort of future risks from recursively self-improving intelligence. So in 2019, I published a paper called Measuring Calibration in Deep Learning with the Reliable Deep Learning Group. And one of my central motivations in working on uncertainty estimation was to address the problem of out-of-distribution control. So the question is, in a new context, does a machine learning system behave in unpredictable ways? And it addresses this category of accident risk, where your AI system doesn't behave in a way that you understand from training. So the core idea with uncertainty estimation is also very safety-centric. It's about calibration and self-awareness on some level. Is your model aware of when it's right and when it's wrong? And can its calibration on its uncertainty, so its awareness of when it's likely to be making a mistake, allow you to avoid accident risk, where it accidentally does something untoward. And for me, this was the closest I could get to an intersection of the sort of like picks and shovels, like actually on the frontier of research, like making progress on the real problem kind of context, while addressing this very like abstract high-level question of whether superintelligence in a runaway context will be dangerous. And it was very sobering to be inventing these new uncertainty metrics and the calibrators that allow you to create more calibrated classifiers. And on some level recognize, I guess just how much the systems are actually like not really capable of going as far as I think the Doomers believe that they will go in as fast a period of time as you'd like it to happen. So concretely, it seemed clear to me that the systems were going to be bottlenecked at levels of performance that were basically akin to speed superintelligence, if you've read Bostrom's sort of superintelligence. That quality superintelligence was going to be limited in its capacities. And so I am pretty afraid of existential risk in the practical, real world, everyone's going to die of heart disease and cancer and sort of Parkinson's and sort of standard diseases sense. I think it's just much more likely that, Steve dies of aging than that the systems end up being the category of quality superintelligence that is world ending. And I think that a lot of the kind of trajectory of like LLMs and the way in which for a little while they do well and then they reach kind of a ceiling of capabilities, and it's clear like what will happen, not going years is like code gen starts to be functional, but it's not the categorical foom that, Eliezer and Robin debated. I can get like Robin Hansen was correct in many ways. And I guess I think it makes it more risky for like you and me, because we're probably just going to die of sort of standard causes. And I guess that's kind of where the like vast proportion of my risk for like the lives of most people who are alive are. I think a lot of people were afraid of the release of GPT-2, and that made me sense how miscalibrated a lot of the sort of Doomer perspectives can be. So if you like want to sort of look at disagreement, I think that the release of GPT-2 was acceptable and safe. I think that the SB 1047, 10 to the 26th limitation was unreasonable, and that models at that scale are actually quite safe. And I think there's, especially put this, like likely always going to be ways that literally every working process can be enhanced by these models in the same way that like Google search is an enhancement. So for example, like if you're trying to do something like a terrorist attack, you can use the models to help you, but it's nothing like the kind of recursively self-improving accident risk that is the actual grounding of the ideology of sort of the Berkeley like apocalypse risk scene. And so I think it's good that folk like Dan Hendricks have kind of pivoted to like cyber security and like bioterror, these very specific, like almost actor-centric applications. Like you're trying to get Claude Code to like make the bioweapon or whatever it is. Does it work or not? Like that is a very concrete question that reasonable people can ask, and that you can get really concrete answers to and traction on, and that you can develop base lines around. And so I think that's just like incredibly grounded, but also night and day different from sort of the flash, recursively self-improving foom, accident-based existential risk that's like actually the foundation of the entire field. And I think if that's all that you had from the beginning, none of it would exist.
I'm referencing something earlier that you said, but do you think it's that we won't get there, or you think that we'll get there with enough, we'll have enough time? Like time is a big thing in the rationality community about you don't have enough time to solve alignment and to figure it out. And that.
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess I have some conceptual criticisms. So alignment as a concept should not be adapted to this new context. That word had a meaning. I don't know if you remember what it was. Like alignment used to mean that you would have an AI system that would be acting in total sort of independence or isolation from human feedback. And the problem was, how do you keep it continually aligned with human interests as it recursively improves, as it self-transforms in completely unpredictable ways? And that was the alignment problem. In many ways, it's been like refigured as like RLHFing the model. I do think that, you know, in the face of research projects that do try to do recursive self-improvement, that might be vaguely relevant, but actually the core version of the alignment problem as conceived has just been kind of lost for, I would say, like 5 to 6 minutes, maybe like a long time. It's been lost for a while. And then people kind of like reworked the concept for a bunch of other purposes, some of them relating to social justice, some of them relating to like other cultural movements. And I think that alignment, like as censorship, is just a totally different conversation entirely. Yeah, so I do think there's some like continual need to, in the face of concepts that turned out to not be relevant, make them relevant by redefining them. And this happened in many ways with the way people use alignment. I think this also happened with the way people use the term AGI. So I think it's not just conceptually relevant that I frame foundation models as being AGI, because if you think that AGI has existed for 4 years, I should say, it's the beginning of 2026, and honestly, my use of Claude in like June, the Slack channel at Anthropic, June 2022, was my like, okay, we have AGI moment. Yeah, I'd say maybe 3.5 years. We've had AGI for 3.5 years, and that's why like everyone's in a tizzy, this is my opinion. But if you think AGI already happened, then it totally changes your sort of catastrophizing frame. It's like, oh, well, we got AGI and everyone didn't die. And it's clear that it's getting better each year. We get more interesting applications, you know, more jobs get automated, more research problems get worked on. But it's a very different dynamic and trajectory than was anticipated. And I think there's a lot of sort of conceptual importance. So one version that I believe is that when people say AGI, actually, in a lot of the apocalyptic context, what they mean is the thing that kills everybody. And until everyone is dead, it's not AGI. And so that definition will continue to shift and continue to refer to more and more advanced systems until the system is capable of genocide, etc. And there are a lot of sort of shifts. So ILIA has SSI, right? Safe superintelligence. So ILIA was part of the original AGI branding. SSI implies actually that, you know, we have AGI on some level. Now what matters is this new concept of superintelligence. And, you know, Andre and Swix and a number of others have pointed out the jaggedness reality that like the AI is already super intelligent. It's a super intelligent blender. You can call it in parallel. You can write 500 books in 5 minutes. So it actually is already speed super intelligence. But in so many ways, it's deficient. It can't do what a theoretical physicist can do, is are the sort of thesis of this event. There's so many dumb mistakes that it continually makes in ways in which it just is incapable of doing basic things. So there's this jaggedness. And I think that that is also kind of an attempt to correct a concept that was broken, and it doesn't go all the way. Like, ideally, your conceptual scheme is just cleanly aligned with the underlying reality, as opposed to you like bringing in a concept like superintelligence. So to be clear, Bostrom wrote his book Superintelligence 2014 prior to the machine learning revolution. So you're borrowing a lot of these old concepts that no longer represent reality accurately. You're correcting, but correcting in a partial way. And so I just think that, like, yeah, both AGI and alignment as like conceptual schemes lead to mistaken conclusions by default. And you're like lost as soon as you use the language. And so there are other concepts. So take P-Doom. Like, I think that concept is inherently Pascal's mugging. So if you're familiar with Pascal's wager, it's an argument for Christianity. And interestingly, Scott Adams kind of succumbed, or like, I don't know, depending on whether you believe in Pascal's wager or not, like acted as though Pascal's wager was true by proclaiming himself to believe in Jesus Christ like a minute before dying, right? And the wager there is, well, if Jesus is Lord and if Christianity is true, then probabilistically, even if you think there's only like a 1 in 1,000 chance that Christianity is true, you should proclaim your like love for Jesus Christ at the end of your life, just so that you could go to heaven in the case that turns out to be right. And so when I say Pascal's mugging, it's this inverse. It's saying if there's a 1 in 1,000 probability that the totality of humanity is destroyed by ASI, then you should devote your every waking minute to infinitesimally reducing the probability that everybody dies. And when challenge comes from prospect theory, so if you read Kahneman and Tversky in Thinking Fast and Slow, they cover the possibility effect and the kink and loss aversion, but really this sort of psychological effect where small probabilities can't actually be effectively represented by humans. We don't know how to engage with them. So as soon as we know something's possible, we assign it an amount of emotional space effectively, which makes us feel worried about it. And so we can't distinguish emotionally between like 1 in 1,000 and 1 in 1 million and 1 in 10 trillion. Like we don't have any sort of emotional ability to deal with that kind of distinction. And there's a viscerality to the totality of people dying, to apocalypse, actually. So many great movements have been built out of the apocalypse. So it's a lot, something that really captures the imagination. And so I think that the right replacement for P-doom, for people who like that sort of probabilistic framing for things, is actually P-life. So I think we should, instead of minimizing the probability that everyone dies, maximize the probability that everyone lives. And so this includes existential risk, right? So if we end up with an existential risk experience, the P-life goes down dramatically. But it includes the upside of using AI in the context of cancer biology, where suddenly you have cures for important cancers that would otherwise like never sort of had traction, and where the use of AI in order to like advance, quality of life and improve genetics and solve a lot of problems that are in many ways meta problems. So I guess if you don't solve the problem of survival, then you no longer exist, and all of your values no longer are represented in the world, practically speaking, except through some mimesis. So I prefer this sort of more inclusive conception of P-life than P-doom. And I think that because it integrates X-risk, it allows you to care about it to a sort of appropriate degree, as opposed to hinging everything on it in the context of Pascal's mugging.
I just want to say Pascal's mugging is one of my favorite concepts from Less Wrong. I think about it a lot in the context of even minor things about like, okay, I'm trying to lower this risk. What's the...
Yeah, how much percentage?
Yeah, what percentage?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you brought that up, and I do think that there is a lot of Pascal's mugging psychologically in people's action, like what they should do.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty intrinsic to the scenario. It's like hard to avoid, like doing that to people. If you're like, actually everyone's going to die, like, yeah. So suddenly it activates the like, holy shit, like this is the only thing I should care about reaction in people, which is rational if there's some substantial probability of actual catastrophe. Yeah, I just think that it's not sufficient to know about Pascal's mugging in theory. You actually have to like live out a like, a functional psychological process that like is defended against Pascal's mugging. Yeah, I don't think Scott did the right thing with his like the end of his life. I feel like he lived a life without conviction if he's gonna play these kind of games with religion. Yeah, I know. There's something.
When I read the statement,
integrity.
I was like, oh. Yeah.
A second.
When I read the statement, his like end of life, I was like shocked a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think it lacks integrity.
Yeah. I mean, I can get the fear.
Yeah.
But it's still, I think I was a little disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that's a very real world example of someone who's like inside of Pascal's wager. So it's not an abstraction. It's a real thing. It happens to you, to me, to anyone who experiences these ideas.
What would you say your P-life is?
Low. Yeah, I think most people are going to die by default, partially because I basically expect there to be like a climate change style apocalyptic fear of progress in AI that makes it really hard for us to like deal with most major diseases. I think that most bioprogress is deeply inhibited by so ironic, this sort of so-called bioethicists who in many cases are, in my mind, more responsible for the deaths of massive numbers of people than anyone else. And I think tragically, like, that's kind of the default for a lot of these neo-Luddite style movements. It's like you become an environmentalist, you shut down nuclear power. Congratulations, you have owned yourself. You become a bioethicist. You shut down stem cell research. You shut down all forms of sort of obviously growthful and important therapies. And yeah, I guess like no one can get IRB approval for basic experiments. We just are not serious about progress. And it's not an abstraction, like without progress, everyone is going to die by default. My P life is something that probably is to be clear that like the most people who are alive today will survive for someone at my age is something like, 10 to 15%. So I think there's a world where like AI goes very well and we make a ton of progress in it. We don't hit a lot of these cultural bottlenecks. And we solve a lot of really important problems. And age reversal and organ replacement work really well. And surgery works really well, and BCIs unlock a lot of new human capabilities. And we can like begin to back things up via BCI foundation models that like are recording brain states in a way that's kind of high fidelity enough. Or we like get conscious intelligence via that process, or something interesting happens in like the next decade or so on that line. I think that AI can open up a lot of interesting opportunities technologically. And I hope to personally be part of that. So I guess I feel pretty, I feel pretty agentic about it. I think it's possible that like, if you decide today that you're gonna like make these things happen, you have a chance of doing it. And any listener to this like also could personally play a role. So I think it's possible to like move the numbers via sufficient, intelligent, agentic action. My P life is still pretty low. So at the end of the day, like, most of society is just very down to die, and will like push back on anyone who like tries to help solve the problem. I think it's like a political challenge. I think it's like a serious scientific challenge. I think the like education processes that produce the kind of people who can make progress on this barely exist. I think there's a lot of reasons to expect that like, your family's gonna die, you're gonna die. It's like probably just gonna happen.
Just personally, I was raised Christian, this whole thing, and then I became an atheist.
Yeah.
But I was always against death, and I would have these, debates with people who were so pro-death, and there's all these good things, and I wrote these articles about it, and I got into Aubrey de Grey, longevity, escape velocity, and life extension. So the sort of like transhumanism type thing about, being able to survive was very appealing. And I just want to say, I have a list of people I don't respect, and bioethicists towards the top of the list. I got on Steve one time because he was doing an interview or writing something. He's like, that's for bioethicists to figure out. I was like, Steve, I don't want to hear.
That's so unserious. To be clear, I think it's important to commandeer the term. I don't think you can allow like the ethical high ground to be held by people who are just obviously filled with ideological venom. It's just there's just so many genuinely believed terrible ideas. Like there's no utilitarian trade-off. Like do no harm turns into do nothing. It's kind of tragic. I don't fully understand how people like live this way, think this way, are this way. It's just like a struggle as a rational person to comprehend it. But similar story for Christianity. So I grew up learning these things, and as soon as I found out that people would go to heaven if they died, I was really curious, like, why don't we just kill everyone who currently believes in Jesus? Like, obviously, we should be doing that. There's some chance that they'll stop believing. So, like, let's do the
you should kill everybody under the age of accountability, even.
Because, if they automatically have it.
If they automatically have it, you should be...
Like, have it.
Yes.
Like, actually, the greatest experience conceivable. The whole thing, like, falls apart if you try to apply, like, basic logic. So, I quickly found out to stop asking questions.
It's interesting because, from the doomer, P-doom side, they're worried because of all the resources being poured into AI and to, building more and more powerful models and systems. But you seem to be like your worldview is more positive for them, but you seem to be pessimistic about the what's being built and how many resources are going. And you think it's likelier than not that people will restrict it enough to make a difference. Because your P life is low.
Yeah.
I'm like depressed at your P life.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was sincere when I said the doomers are the real dreamers. Like they really believe that the technology will be able to do anything and will recursively self-improve and will unlock all of the Pandora's box. And I really don't think that's going to happen very quickly. And
when do you think we would get to the sort of stereotypical in people's minds AGI or really transformative?
I don't know if like these terms are helpful. I think they're really like hoodwinking people. So for example, transformative AI, terrible term.
Well, you said like 95% of the economy in 2022.
Yeah, so that's an interesting definition. I think I like that definition quite a bit. I don't think it's a good definition of AGI, but I think it's a great definition of a concrete, measurable representation of progress. And I think you can get to 95% economic automation and not be afraid of X risk at all. It's like, what are people in the economy doing? Like, a lot of them are sending emails. A lot of them are recording video interviews. So if you get video gen and it creates documentaries based on people's transcripts and like historical YouTube videos, you can like burst your documentary into existence with like a search agent. Or it can generate people like me, and they can say things like this. And your job would be part of the 95%, and I could watch the AI generated documentary. To be clear, I could code up something like this tonight. And then, like you'd be part of the 95%, and so what? Like, who cares? I can already watch like way more documentaries than exist. I made a book generator. So I'm the meta author of 10,000 books. And on some level, awesome. But on some level, who cares? There are already way more books than I have time to read. It's like, actually, all that matters is maybe personalization, but mostly quality. And so I don't think the 95% number has to be super meaningful from an X-risk perspective. But I think it's meaningful from an economic perspective. So, I like how concrete it is, how specific it is. I think that it's true that a lot of people's jobs can be automated in the near future, but most people's jobs are bullshit jobs. Most people's jobs are structural. They are embedded in power structures. Like, the reason they exist is their manager needs to get a bigger budget next year. And the reason that their company exists is that they are a part of a monopoly or a duopoly or some other oligarchic structure that is structurally making money. You understand? There's not like that many real jobs at the end of the day.
Are you worried about the societal effects of job loss? Or do you think it'll be...
I'm definitely worried about the opposite. I'm like worried we'll make insufficient progress.
You're really pessimistic.
Yeah. Well, I'm very ambitious, so I've like, an intention to survive. So
you can be ambitious and optimistic, but I'm depressed. You're so tapped in. I'm depressed. I thought you'd be like, oh, the magic's coming.
Yeah.
We're gonna. When do you think we would cure aging or cure cancer?
Yeah,
do you think it's going to be stopped before?
Cancer is a very, in general, oncology is split up in many ways. So leukemia is very, very challenging. But like, there are certain tumor-centric cancers for which antibody-centric solutions are likely to work.
I'm trying to come up with a definition that would get at the heart of what...
I think aging's a much more important and harder question. Yeah. So you want to ideally reverse the general aging process. Yeah. So it's not that cancer kills people, it's that like weakened immune systems over the course of a person's life allows for things like cancer to kill them. But if cancer doesn't do it, then it'll be Alzheimer's 5 years later. You know what I mean?
Listen, I'm all on I get the whole Aubrey de Grey argument about, focusing on the wrong thing.
And so there are a lot of ideas he has, like the bridge, right? So if we start to make a lot of progress, then people can start to live long enough to make live long enough for there to have been more progress, right?
Yes.
And their engineering frame, I think, is really healthy. I think it's very grounded. Like, the idea that you are a biomachine is the starting position for believing any of these ideas about aging, because a lot of people sacralize the physical body in a way that makes them sacralize death. And it's typically attached to their religious tradition. And so I think that there's a religious component to this. Like, a lot of why it's possible for, someone to think like rationally or with an engineering mentality about death is that they have like unglued from the sort of belief structures of tribal religion. And for a lot of reasons, I think it's important that there be some like alternative, some scientific centric religious experience that allows a person to, be a human being, so to speak, but believe true things. And there currently is just not really a way to do that. But I do think that it opens people up to the possibilities that exist. And Aubrey Gray is a great example of someone who like has an open mind and is somewhat ambitious. I do think like a lot of the economy will be automatable. I don't think a lot of it will be automated. I think that's kind of where I'm at. And that's a really depressing perspective, but sociologically speaking, I've interacted with government organizations that have a database. And in order to interact with their database, you call them and wait on the phone for like 40 minutes, and then someone picks up and they like ask you for your input details, and they look you up in the database and they tell you what the database says. And then you tell them, make this update to the database, and they make the update, and you hang up. And this would happen in like 2020 when, for 20 years, the internet revolution had made it possible for me to like log into a website and like make a change request. You know what I mean? It's like this kind of thing where there's an entire like organization that doesn't need to exist. It's like replaceable via a CRUD app. Like this kind of situation is just so omnipresent. I don't even think like.
So are you a libertarian ANCAP guy, or?
I don't think this is like a political position.
Government inefficiency.
I think government efficiency is a reality. I don't think it's, to be clear, I don't think it's just government organizations. I think it's a feature of most monopolistic or oligarchic contexts. It's an incentive structure situation.
And you think the incentive structures are so strong that it will prevent progress, like automating jobs?
Yeah.
And that will regulate AI to make it so that we don't hit.
Yeah, no, I think it's really easy to do to nuclear power what was done to AI. Really easy. I think it's the default scenario, and people need meaning. They kind of have been deprived, so social justice kind of crashed as a meaning structure, and in a lot of ways, like EA also kind of crashed as a meaning structure, but I feel like it has still like potential for the masses, and we'll see what ends up being the next big collective meaning generator. So if it turns out to be AI, that's an interesting world. It might still try to be environmentalism or climate change or ESG or like one of these ideologies. But I think it's plausible that it's going to be a neo-Luddite ideology as opposed to something, interested in progress. China is interesting. Like they actually have a very different way of operating. They have a lot of engineers in governance, and they seem like kind of slightly more resilient to like, I shouldn't say that. Communists. I don't know. It's hard actually to say that. They're more resilient to ideological pressure, but I don't know. We'll see. And Europe is as like decadent and degraded to a point that's hard to even believe. Like try to go to Germany and like create a power plant. I don't know. It's just they like killed their nuclear power. I don't know. It just seems like they've totally lost the script and are not even close to like anything reasonable. It's just kind of tragic.
Big coals rubbing their hands together. So happy.
Yeah, and they're all cold. I just think it's a little bit unbelievable. It's a little bit farcical.
Lay and I actually met a German woman who's very social justice and very climate oriented, and I was asking her,
really common,
like, hey, what do you think about this whole nuclear power plant thing? Like, isn't that? And she's like, oh no, I'm glad we got. Yeah. I thought maybe she'd be like, oh yeah, we screwed up.
Yeah,
she was like happy.
Not at all. Yeah. I mean, there's very little coherence there. People are excited about being good.
Yeah.
But their definition of being good is like very socially like constructed. So.
But from if you spend time at Lighthaven, they're like, or even I think the general public is like, well, you've got who are cynical about AI or think it's bad. Yeah. You've got these powerful corporations. They've got so much money. You've got Google, one of the most powerful companies. They're pouring all this money. They're making all this progress. To them, it feels unstoppable. Like, oh, the little protester, the people who want to be Luddites. Yeah. It feels like it's inevitable. Like you can't fight.
What is it? I think it's always in this surprisingly non-concrete it.
Well, you're worried about. It sounds like you're worried about the public or other groups stopping AI progress.
Yeah, I think that's the default. I think like
So
en
for them,
masse,
they're like,
especially
they
in the
feel-
U.S. and in Europe.
Yeah.
Europe's been like like Luddite vibes for like the last 20
Yeah.
years.
Well, Europe, I think, is like
they're very far gone on that
Yeah,
front.
yeah.
And America's that way too, except in Silicon Valley and some New York, some places.
But I guess I'm just saying it's interesting that the people
Yeah.
who are worried about this feel like they have the opposite view, that it feels like the AI progress will go about without any restriction.
I think that's true. I think that there is a lot of progress relative to the rest of the economy. But, I mean, it's kind of depressing to say this, but AI is kind of the only game in town. And AI didn't exist, there really wouldn't be any important technological progress right now. And maybe bio would be seeing something, but it's a kind of tragic outside of AI. Crypto got wrecked. Like, it used to be you were in the Valley, there were 2 games in town, like AI game, the crypto game, that game's gone. And Silicon Valley is the hub of technological progress. But I'm sure you may be familiar with this sort of very strange scenario we're in, where when you say the word technology, like technology used to apply to a ton of things. Now it's just about software, and maybe it's just about AI. And yeah, it used to be that like your couch could be technology, the chair you're sitting in could be technology. But we just don't make that kind of progress anymore. Sorry, and that's just true of like the vast majority of forms of progress. Is they basically have been stagnant for ages and they're not going anywhere. And I think it's interesting that AI exists. And so, yeah, I don't know, I guess.
But I think many of the things that you're saying have stagnated weren't because of, some of them, like obviously nuclear power plants, were because of restrictions and regulations.
Yeah.
But some of the others weren't. But the way you see it is that AI will stagnate not just because it's a hard technical problems, but because of people trying to regulate it, like with...
Yeah, I mean, I do think that if it were not for some geopolitical complex around China, both the American political left and right would be anti-AI. And so it's kind of an artifact of competition, which is not unusual. So, like, basically since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the US has felt zero motivation to go to the moon or to build nuclear technologies, and I think that's kind of just the default state of affairs unless there's some competitive instinct. And it's pretty similar incentive structure wise to what I was describing with government. If you have like a sort of mono superpower and there's no competitors, there's really no reason to do anything.
I see. So you're just like, people suck, basically, and there's not that many agentic, ambitious...
I don't see it as people suck. I think it almost
like
puts
there's just
the responsibility in entirely the wrong place. It's not like people's
just
nature
like the
is up to them.
systems, or...
No, it's just closer to like a basic recognition that it's usually situations of conflict or crisis that like force progress upon the world, as opposed to it being something that happens by default. And
But whether there was competition or not, you personally, right, are still, you want to solve these problems regardless of whether...
But to be clear, like, I think there are problems. So if you have a Christian...
But it's a problem that some people
if you have
don't,
a Christian,
right?
If you have a Christian worldview, you think it's great that everyone's dying because they're all going to heaven. Yeah. So if you don't see a problem, you don't feel the need to solve the problem. There's no need for a solution. Similar story, like if there's no impending apocalypse, there's no reason to try to go stop the apocalypse, which is actually a really great adventure. I don't think it's easy to be self-aware that you're framing your life narrative in adventure-like terms, because admitting that to yourself dampens dramatically like the amount of motivation you feel to step into that narrative. But like living a life where you are the savior of the world is actually really a fun adventure, in a way that living a life where you are, I don't know, a lot of people love like the family frame of a father to these kids. That's actually really great and meaningful and sustainable and scalable. They don't have the need for this sort of like super intense adventurous life narratives. And then I guess a lot of people can be niches in economic areas, or they have ambition, and what ambition means for them is they want to be an expert. They want to have some research paper published with their name on it that marks them as part of mathematical history or whatever. And that's kind of cute and wholesome, and like much less of a totalizing life ideology than we're saving the world from climate change or nuclear war or AI risk. And so I feel like people get to kind of pick from a relatively small body of meaning generating narrative processes. And it makes a lot of sense to like pick the fun, interesting one. And I don't think people frame that as being what they're doing. They just go through life and they experience ideas. And they end up inside of the ideology that quote unquote captures them. And I don't mean captures in an agentic sense, like the ideology like has sort of some hunter-like intention. I mean in the mimetic sense that they end up in a mimetic equilibrium. That is, they end up with the beliefs that crowd out other beliefs. And if the beliefs they have don't do that, then they continue to move through life experiencing ideas. And it's only once they hit beliefs that it feels like are worth running their life, basically, or like that stop other things from changing them, that they, I mean, the word that jumps to mind is stagnate, but they end up in equilibrium with their beliefs. And yeah, I guess my perspective is that I kind of watch myself move through psychological equilibria, and I'm interested in exploration or search or open-mindedness, or like being out kind of above the ideologies. And I think there's an agentic element. Like I'm interested in the construction of meaning processes rather than like kind of embracing mimetic meaning systems. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. It might be a bit much for folk, but like, and that feels like the obvious way to live life to me.
What do you think is going on when the heads of the top AI companies, presumably who know best or who are in there managing things, are all expressing concern about, you know, like Steve brought up, you have Demis and Dario at Davos saying, we wish we could slow down. We have these timelines. If it wasn't for China, we would slow down. You know, Sam has famously made statements, although I don't know what he thinks now, but all of them are concerned about existential risk. Do you think that they're saying that strategically, or that they actually believe it, but that they're mistaken, or they have a rosier view of progress? And
yeah, I mean, I think they are really embedded in social worlds that are incredibly strong incentive structures. And so it's super important to simultaneously make as much progress as possible and keep absolutely everybody in a state of belief that you are the person who should have the power to do everything. And so you want to be someone who can be vouched for. You want the person who's worried to say, I think Demis is the right person to build the AGI. And the path to being that person, at least the easy path, goes through being able to build trust with all parties. And so with all people who are like high-level executives at places like Google, they are sitting on top of a population of employees. And those employees have just horrifically diverse political and emotional beliefs. And so you have to simultaneously like keep happy, aggressive, social justice minded vigilantes for whom, whether it's race or gender, whatever their obsession is, like that's what they want you to be. And you speak to that. And also the subset of your population that is just totally mission centric, where they're hell-bent on creating the next great thing. And those are the people for whom like their meaning system is about making as much progress as possible. And you need to speak to them too. And then there's this other subpopulation that really believes in the progress. They're actually perhaps the greatest dreamers, but they dream so vividly and brilliantly that they believe they're going to kill everybody because it's just going to be incredibly successful. And those plausibly are the people who are most capable of unlocking the most important breakthroughs. And you need them to trust you too. So how do you sit atop an organization that has all of these competing political entities and continue to be a maximally trusted agent who can make all the product decisions and launch them successfully and have the entire valley adore you? So that's the world that Demis and Dario and Sam live in, and Jeff Dean and all these people. And it's super impressive, honestly. I just want to say it's like hard to be in that position. So yeah, no, for what it's worth, I don't mean this to be insulting either. I don't think that any public position of any of them is anything but a construct of the feedback loop that they are in with an incredibly complex social environment. That's not to say that they're incapable of thinking independently. They're more than capable of thinking independently. and they do it all the time. It's just that they are in hypersensitive political contexts, and it is totally dysfunctional for them to be substantially out of line with anyone else. And if they, so say for example, like Demis goes renegade, suddenly there's an important subset of DeepMind that can defect, and Sam immediately can use the distance between their like worldviews as justification for stealing a tremendous amount of talent, or Dario, right? So let me tell you, like, it's so sensitive that the reason both OpenAI and Anthropic exist is the belief that the leaders of the other organizations were insufficiently cautious with respect to existential risk. So just know that every time they open their mouth, the existence of their organization is at risk. And regardless of what they, from first principles, believe or not, they have seen firsthand the consequences of saying the wrong thing in the wrong moment. I just want to make you aware of the context. And obviously, like, you know, you end up believing the thing that it's helpful for you to believe, and doing it in a genuine way is way better than doing it in an artificial way. So you like make yourself believe whatever it's most important to believe. Maybe there's a lot of evidence backing it, and the collective is really smart, and you're internalizing that collective. But I see them as mouthpieces of the body of memes that are stewing in their organizations and in their customers, and that is the only functional way to be in their position.
I can ask this off camera if you want to, but I'm just curious who you think will win if you had to bet.
It's just totally a broken frame.
Yeah.
It's like, win what? Sorry.
But from their point of view, right?
This is an AGI mistake.
No, I know. You think that.
So
I'm saying,
yeah.
From their point of view, they are trying to race to AGI from, you know.
Yeah. But if AGI already happened, then like, what's the race?
Sure. But
this doesn't make any sense to me.
I guess
your question makes no sense to me.
Okay.
So let me be specific. I'm not saying that I don't understand what you're asking. I'm saying that the idea that there's a race to a finite point, and one team is going to get to that point first, and at that moment something will happen.
Yeah.
But that is at the core of the mistake that's being made industry-wide. And I think like Dario is vaguely aware of that kind of conceptual confusion, and in his interviews he like tries to do away with some of the conceptual stuff. And I think the race dynamics are real from a customer perspective. Like, do I use Gemini with my next call, or do I use Claude? But that is a race day in and day out for market share. That's a real race. This isn't actually a race to AGI. It's a race to who's going to use Claude Code or Codex like tomorrow and next year. And so I think that the question that you asked is actually pretty ridiculous, but people take it seriously to a point that it's hard to believe.
But going back to what you said, do you think that many of the founders and leaders of these companies actually believe that? You know, because Steve in these conversations, talking to these guys, that's what they say.
Yeah. I think that the implication is there's a point where one of the three, or four if you count Grok, or 10 if you count Kimi and Moonshot and the other DeepSeek, the other Chinese, phenomenal models, like, the implication is that there's a single point in time at which they will forever be the monopoly. And I think that's, at this point, pretty specious, ludicrous belief. I mean, maybe it's too much. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
I think that.
But I'm trying to get what you're saying with these lab people, the leaders, at least some of them, because some of them could just be like you're saying. They have to say.
I can walk you through the dynamics by which monopoly is like kind of inconceivable. So, as soon as there's a severe capability diff, so say you get Claude Code, and for like 6 months everyone's obsessed with Claude Code. Sam's going to announce a code red at OpenAI, and is going to hire who he needs to hire, raise who he needs to raise, cut the AI for Science program, cut the whatever is required in order to build a version of Codex that is better than Claude Code. And Demis is going to do the same. And the talent that knows how to make Claude Code is going to increase in value. So economically speaking, the value of that talent to Anthropic is far less, so on the specific knowledge of how to build Claude code, than the value of that knowledge to OpenAI in a world where OpenAI is better capitalized than Anthropic, but does not have access to that talent. And similar story for Gemini. So how are you going to keep a monopoly on the talent that knows how to maintain the edge? Practically speaking, they haven't. Empirically speaking, these models have been neck and neck for how long? Like 3 years? And now there's 5 Chinese companies and like, GLM 4.7 is better at agentic coding than Grok and Gemini. And you think that's just going to disappear too? Yeah, and these Chinese researchers and engineers are no longer, okay, it's not 2010, right? Like they're legit. Sorry to break it to you. And so I just think it's ridiculous.
Steve talked about how you're a very capable speaker. And I also think I've talked to a lot of people on both sides. I think you're sort of in a little different, I would say.
See, I'm just a sides thing. I'm not into sides, generally speaking. It's kind of ridiculous to say it. I think that, Eliezer and Nate, if they believe what I believe about the probabilities of risk, would just more or less do what I was doing. If they were really being intellectually honest.
Yeah.
I think I kind of identify as an EA, like OG, to be clear, who thinks the most effectively altruistic thing to do is like save everyone's life for self-indulgence, which is obvious if you think that the probability of doom is low, which I do because I'm kind of a pessimist comparatively on the technologies, like recursively self-improving capabilities. And so that's where I'm at. I don't think it's an unreasonable position. I guess, I'm surprised that there are not more people wherever I am.
But I'm just saying, even people who don't take sides, I think they don't have the same...
the same kind of like meta-ideological perspective.
Fair. How do you imagine AGI House being meaningfully different from other AI hacker houses or founder collectives that have emerged in this space?
Yeah, I mean, so many of these hacker houses are just like inspired by AGI House. I guess the obvious difference is there's a grounding belief in, I guess, the power of the like technical founder, researcher, like archetypal community member to, in concert with a bunch of other community members, create, again, unbelievable progress. There's a grounding ethos, and the ethos says like the way to be a good person in the world, the way to like do right by your life, is to unleash your heroic creation, is to make something incredible. And I think that a lot of houses just are not as sort of like filled with this belief and this ethos and spirit. And there have been many like kind of phases of AGI House. So from time to time, it feels very different. Like the AI for science world feels different from the like media audiovisual world. But I think there's a second big difference, which is the people. So the like origin story of AGI House is it's like Ben Mann, the founder of Anthropic, one of the first authors of GPT-3, but also the builder of Claude, talking to Andre Karpathy, who like made Autopilot, hanging out with Robin Rombach, hanging out with John Schulman, like all in the same room discussing like how to build the future of AI. And so there's something about the level of quality of thinking that comes out of a space like this. You just end up with incredible ideas a year and a half before anyone else has thought about them. And there's kind of like an ideological gap too. Like we end up like ideologically ahead, so to speak, of the kind of rest of the valley, because we experience ideas early. We come up with them in a lot of cases, and like we work through them, and then someone comes up with something like a year and a half later, and like we already moved on to like things that were like much more interesting to us. So for example, vibe coding is a great example. So Andre coined vibe coding in like February of last year, and we had a hyperstition event in April of the year before, which was about simulation, about web simulation specifically. And so web sim hyperstition, is like a really concrete example. So before Lovable existed, before Bolt existed, before like any like Replit, before any of these like vibe coding website generators existed, we were 8 months before that partying around basically WebSim and WorldSim. So News had WorldSim. WebSim was this really early company. So we had this AI for Thought event back in October, and like the guy who made WebSim was at that event. The AI for Thought community was working on a lot of these generative web ideas. So I actually published in, I want to say like September 2023, a Chrome extension that modified any website that you were on based on the prompt that you gave the extension. So it, in parallel, sent all of the web content to an AI model and rewrote all of the site. So you could say, rewrite the site in the style of Donald Trump, and it'd be hilarious. Or rewrite this in the style of Elias Yudkowsky, and it would Yudkowskify, add paper citations to every claim in this website. It's a Chrome extension called the Generative Web. So yeah, and then like I found Anton because he made ML Engineer, which was a code-based generator that preceded Lovable. So like before, Anton was a billionaire, he was like hacking on code-based generators, and in like, I don't know, in September 23, I was hacking on code-based generators. And then he incorporated Lovable, and they launched 3 times, and the third launch went well, and like now they're worth billions. But like, Anton was a roommate here in like November and December 23. So yeah, I don't know. Like, basically, we just are ahead. We are ahead by like 8 to 12 months. Yeah, which is important.
My second question is, when you first imagined AGI House, how did you expect it to advance your mission around AI? And based on experience so far, where has the reality matched this vision? And where has it surprised or disappointed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a dreamer, so there's a lot of things that haven't happened that I wanted to happen. But yeah, I guess the original idea was also a really creative one. It was kind of like Buds. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Navy SEALs, but they have this sort of underwater demolition training. It's insane training, which includes a Hell Week. So one of the original AGI House ideas, like right before I renamed Neogenesis to AGI House, was like Buds for machine learning research. So the idea is you would show up for a 5-day sprint in which you would implement every machine learning algorithm, random forest, k-nearest neighbors, confidence from scratch, everything from scratch, and in which you would implement every category of recommender system, neural recommenders, collaborative filtering. You would build all of the in-production app systems, and you would do this in like back-to-back 16-hour days in which it was kind of a trial by fire, but everyone had a personal tutor. And I, in general, I love intensity. I love learning to an insane degree. And so combining the sort of most intense special forces training experience with machine learning felt super fun. So that was an idea. And we ended up doing this sort of hackathon with the creators of a lot of these interesting algorithms. And one thing I love about the hackathon idea, and to be clear, it's really popular today. I know it seems crazy to say this, but at the time, there were basically no hackathons. It barely existed back in 2022. And we started doing them because we wanted to have events that produced things. So it's easy to go to an event and talk to people, but it's something else to co-create with them and then launch something and ship it, right? Make it real and have people use it. And you blow away the boundaries. So people are in their own companies and now they're all collaborating with each other. So I don't know, a lot of those original hyper intense ideas turned into, well, what if we just do single day events where you go 0 to 100 on a project and you ship it, and it has the potential to be life-changing. And life-changing in that if it's a product that could be a company and it catches fire, it could be really impactful. Or if it's a research project that could end up being a research breakthrough, it's impactful. On disappointments, so I wanted to create a global entity that actually has been a lot more time consuming than I hoped. So we got into Cambridge House, we got into a Seoul House, and the cultures in Korea and other places were just actually quite complicated to make work with co-living. So there's a bunch of interesting learnings there. Yeah, I would say, I know I have a lot of things that I wish I had already done. There are a lot of opportunities missed for sure, but on that, it's been a pretty like wildly successful journey.
How would you describe yourself, the traits in terms of your personality or even physiological traits or the level of experience in different aspects as that makes you different from other leaders in the AI space? And how do you think those personal traits have affected your projects and journey so far?
It's strange talking about myself. So fascinating. Yeah, I guess I really, really love ideas to like a degree that it might be hard to believe. And so primarily I act out of a curious instinct. Like there is very little that I do that isn't like secretly a learning project for my own like fascination being fulfilled by like the project. So like we're here at an AI physics hackathon that I'm throwing, and a bunch of people are building projects, but like a big secret agenda is I really want to personally do automated physics research. And so I'm like extending Steve's work on the Schrodinger equations. And this is really consistent. So when I was at Google Brain, a lot of my research was just like, I wanted to learn the subfield that I was doing the research in more than I wanted like a result. I was really curious. I run this like reading group. I try to read in almost every domain. And so I guess I'm obsessed with this concept of technical omnicompetence. That's also part of why AI physics exists. It's like a part of this sort of Kardashev society. Like I want to have a society where everyone has kind of incoming PhD level understandings of every major technical field. Like not just the main sort of sciences like math, physics, biochem, but like the engineering disciplines, mechanical and electrical engineering, like bioengineering, yeah, computer science obviously, but also like functional, practical working knowledge of economics, and where applied mathematics is taken as seriously as pure mathematics. And so a part of the entire agenda of like the sequence of group analysis from Neogenesis to AGI House is to build a society that is engaged in collective, creative, technical invention. And I really believe in the inventor as like an identity type, as an archetype. I think that like the absence of Teslas or people who live creativity as a lifestyle, as opposed to sort of like wearing the clothing of creativity, like pretending to be creative, in my opinion, I think there just aren't enough of them. I think there are some people who like have 10 ideas every day that like if they kind of like hypothetically execute on them, like would just have this sort of Da Vinci style like notebook of sort of their life. And I think it's really tragic that that identity is economically and financially dysfunctional. I really think like the vast majority of human capital and capabilities are wasted because incentive structures disallow the space of identities that are most glorious, that are most worth living out. And yeah, I guess a lot of stagnation comes out of the comprehensive crushing of the creative spirits of intelligent individuals. And a big fraction of the purpose of the existence of AGI House is to be this context where creative invention is centered as high and is preserved, and where you're expected actually to creatively invent all the time. And I don't think it's consistent with the kind of the financial objectives of like corporate America or education systems or religious institutions. Part of what's interesting to me about AGI House and Neogenesis and these kind of interstitial organizations is a kind of mechanistic invention. It's a new way to cooperate with people, to like show up at a group house and like code something that maybe you want to do just of its own accord. Like a lot of it's just genuine. You just are curious, or you want to know if you can build something, or you want to maintain, you know, build a new skill set, right? And you want to kind of let newness be normal. I think like a lot of software engineers kind of get stultified in their like company's code base, working on the same thing every single day. It's so refreshing to like start with a blank slate. I think that's part of why vibe coding took off. It's like it allowed people to kind of express their creative instincts. But I think that makes me pretty different as leaders. Like my objective is in a lot of ways the total expression of like my creative instincts and the creative instincts of everyone who's at the series of events or in the community in the context that I'm in. And so it's in many ways like a kind of a non-economic frame for things. Like a lot of people who write code for fun, like are really serious about it actually being for fun. So I think I just love the freedom to be able to like think about and build whatever you want and not care about the incentive structures around you.
Beautiful. Besides passion for ideas and invention, what other aspects about yourself you think has driven your success so far, and what other aspects you think are perhaps kind of impeding you a little bit?
I imply that like they're not, as sort of like economically focused. So it's really easy if you're like living a hyper-creative lifestyle to be unfocused. And it's really easy if you are working with totally different people on different projects to end up with like tons of partial projects or unfinished projects or like partial inventions. And so I think that's the obvious failure mode to directly answer that question. But I think one interesting thing about my world is it's very intellectually rich. And so the people who I talk to are fascinated by like me and this world and the people in it. And so I can attract some of the smartest people to commune with us for fun. I don't know, like you and I were talking about Suchinamari's information geometry. And like we had an event around information geometry last year as a reading group. In general, like who thinks about like applications of information geometry for fun on the weekend? Well, we do. And there aren't actually that many places that you can go to have a conversation even remotely like that. And so one upside is like people like, Andre Karpathy or Anton Asika, like people who like us will want to be in that environment. Steve Sue, like love this sort of physics dinner that we had last night. There are all of these really renegade intellectuals who care about thinking and learning for its own sake in a lot of cases, who like love this place. And it just so happens that that kind of person also often reliably builds multi-billion-dollar companies, because as soon as you get that level of polymathic capability and you attach like any reliability to it, it's crazy how much people can accomplish.
When you said one of the important aspects of the house, the identity, is like very much attracted to this kind of ideas, basically truth-seeking and intellectual excitement. I can very much relate to that. And yes, I very much enjoy our conversations today about everything, especially the information geometry bit. That was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. I implemented like manifolds on normal distributions as like a visualization.
Yes.
Because it's actually so conceptually expanding to operate on your operators. And that frame is really gorgeous on that front. So I love that too.
I also want to point out that I find you to have this rare combination of technical like solidness and ideological groundedness and also real world impact. And to me, that seems like a Renaissance man, and this house is on its trajectory to be a Renaissance house. So I very much want to, basically hang out more here in the future. So sure. This is like I just want to share one tidbit of how I see you and the rest of the, people/houses being different in this space.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that I am pretty obsessed with ideological groundedness. So I think that's accurate. I do think that belief systems have impacted me really deeply. And so I feel like the need to be hyper aware about them. And yeah, I'm quite charismatic. So I was in this unusual scenario of like being phenomenal at like both debates. So when I grew up, I was like an impromptu speaker in forensics, and I was sort of a state competitive sort of debater. And then at Harvard, I was in parley debate, but I studied applied math, right? So this gives you this complex of skills, like, great speeches, but they're about, uncertainty and like the nature of out distribution detection or whatever. And so yeah, I do have a very unusual vibe where it's like, clearly this person could be giving speeches, some political convention, but actually all of it's hyper-technical and about like the details of some problem in physics or machine learning, whatever it might be. That was intentional. So when I got to Harvard, I primarily concentrated in applied mathematics because I felt like it was very high leverage. Like it's harder to learn math outside of school. Everything else, it's easy for me to learn from books. I just love reading. I self-studied like a huge number of AP exams when I was in high school. So it was clear to me that I could learn from books for the most part for everything that wasn't like math heavy. And so I did this kind of boosting. You may be familiar with gradient boosting algorithms. They basically they model their residuals. So I basically was like, oh, well, here's where my error is greatest. Let me train a new model that's for basically fixing this sort of error. And in that context, it basically was about finding every major hole in my technical skill set and spending enough time on it to become functional. And so, yeah, I don't know. I really believe that it's important to be able to become anything. And if you can't, then you're making your decisions about how to live life as a function of your limited skill set. And I read this book called The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, and it was a true inspiration. It was back when I was 17. And the ideas in that book are about decomposing learning into its sort of finer details. So he'll talk about making smaller circles, which is, for him, the way he describes the recursive decomposition to the very details of a throw in Tai Chi push hands or a position in chess. And he is simultaneously like a Tai Chi world champion and the junior chess world champion. So he demonstrated those learning principles in distinct domains. And I used a lot of his ideas and some of the inspiration from him to become a top 10 ultimate Frisbee player when I was at Harvard. So I was playing professionally for Boston, and I was competing for the Callahan, and a lot of the practice processes that I kind of internalized from that book and the kind of belief in myself that I internalized came from that frame. So I guess I'm pretty intentional about finding some angle on life that I don't understand and inhabiting that identity for long enough to know whether or not I should spend my entire life in it. When we talk about technical omnicompetence, it's a kind of a desire to live in an entire society that has total technical competence. I really want to live in a country where that's what's conceived of as literacy. Like you're illiterate in math. I think it could be an expressive version of this is something like, humans typically speak languages like English, but mathematics is the language of reality, it's the language of God. And why be illiterate in the language of God? I feel like I am born in an illiterate era where nobody knows how to communicate. I think that people who have BCIs and speak in neuralese will feel this way more intensively. How could you have lived in the illiterate era? And as soon as right access works and all of the knowledge of the foundation models is internalized in the mind of anyone who installs a brain-computer interface, there will be a sense that we are a part of a benighted people, like a barbarian culture. So, it's plausible that I'm one of the last generations of people to speak this way. I hope that's true. But I also think it's plausible that none of that happens and that we have to build a society that's technically omnicompetent and that's actually an important prerequisite to making any of those streams real. So I feel like this year I'm really setting about to build that society, and the AI Cross Physics event is definitely a part of what I'm calling the Kardashev Society, which is a part of what I'm calling Ascension, which is a part of the sort of umbrella structure of a hierarchical comprehensive representation of all technical knowledge in an event series and a body of people that will allow everyone I know to partake in a kind of technically competent culture.
I'm curious, in terms of earlier you talked about you have this gradient boosting analogy.
Yeah.
Find the residual and try and fix that.
Yeah.
In terms of personal improvement, where do you want to invest the most amount of your effort? I.e., where do you see as the biggest residual? Which aspect?
Well, recently I've been pretty obsessed with capital. So I feel like I've been deeply undercapitalized, and so this last few months I've raised